Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Akash Pown. I'm Programme Director for Devolution here at the Institute for Government, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the first ever session of the IfG DevoLab.
I'm a great believer in devolution. I'm a great believer in the idea that those with skin in the game, those that know their communities, make much better decisions than people sitting in Westminster and Whitehall.
Welcome to the IfG DevoLab, the Institute for Government's new platform for learning from the policy and governance innovations that devolution has enabled. Over the past decade, mayors and strategic authorities across many parts of England have taken on a growing array of powers, and they've begun to use them in increasingly innovative ways. A core benefit of devolution is the space it creates for places to develop their own solutions to common policy challenges, allowing policymakers across the country to learn from each other about what works and what does not. Devolution in this way can act as a policy laboratory, or what we call the DevoLab. Here are some examples of what we mean. In Greater Manchester, strides have been taken towards the creation of an integrated transport system with publicly controlled buses and trams, the B network. Local leaders in the West Midlands have repurposed the Adult Skills Fund to support thousands more people to secure advanced technical qualification. The Mayor of South Yorkshire, meanwhile, has championed a strategy to address health inequalities, for instance through the provision of free beds and bedding to under 5s. In Tees Valley, the Mayor there has used devolved investment funds to save the local airport from closure as part of a wider economic regeneration strategy. In West Yorkshire, the Mayor is using her role as Police and Crime Commissioner to lead a strategy for reducing violence against women and girls. Greater London has even longer experience of devolution, a quarter century, and it's been the testbed for policies from congestion charging on the roads to public rent-a-bike schemes. And there's also much to be learnt from policy innovations in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. But how do we know what works, why it has worked, and what lessons mayors, local leaders and devolved bodies should learn from each other? Well, that's what the IfG DevoLab is for. As part of this, the Institute for Government will be hosting events, producing case studies, crunching the data, and disseminating findings to help mayors and strategic authorities take better decisions about how to use their powers and budgets. So contact us with suggestions of innovative policies or governance reforms you think more people should know about, or if you'd like to work with us to make the DevoLab a reality. So that, I hope, has given you all a reasonably clear idea of the purpose of this new programme and why we're all here today. Here at the IfG, we've long made the argument, in fact, that one of the principal benefits of devolution is that potential it offers to create a laboratory of policy, service delivery and governance innovation. And we decided a little while ago that what we would like to do was to create this new platform to showcase some of the most interesting and successful initiatives that devolution has enabled, and then to help share the evidence of what works. And thus was born the idea of the DevoLab. So over the course of the rest of this year and hopefully beyond, as part of this programme, we'll be exploring a range of issues, including how devolution can enhance transport connectivity, how it can improve the supply of housing, how it can bring investment into local economies, and more. We'll be hosting a number of events like this one in London and elsewhere across the country. We'll be producing case studies and drawing out those transferable lessons so that places can learn from each other. And in particular, we hope, so that newer mayors and strategic authorities can be helped to advance more quickly up the learning curve. So we're very grateful to, well, first of all, our strategic series partners, L&G, for their support of this initiative. And then our partners working with us on today's event and the case studies and policy briefing that we'll be publishing over the coming months. Impact on Urban Health, who's Executive Director of Impact, Peter Babudou, joins me on stage. Pete, it's great to have you with us for this conversation.
Yeah, fantastic to be here. Thanks very much, Akash. And it feels like it's a really timely debate, and so I really look forward to us getting to how we can use devolution to help make sure that people are healthier, which is at the root of so much kind of prosperity.
Absolutely, yeah. So, no, great to have you with us, and Pete will be speaking a bit later in the conversation. The focus today is, of course, on that specific question of how mayoral strategic authorities can use their powers and their influence to address the challenge of health inequalities. So the format of today's session is as follows. We're going to hear presentations from 3 speakers, each of whom will speak for 10 minutes or so about a specific initiative, a programme or an approach that's been taken at the devolved level to addressing health inequalities. And broadly speaking, we've asked each of our speakers to address 3 things. So what was the innovation tried, what was new in the approach adopted, what have been the results, and what are the lessons they've learnt from that process. So we'll be hearing from them in order. Pete will then come back in and give a response to the presentations, and then there'll be a conversation among the 5 of us. More observant types in the audience may have seen there's only 4 seats on the audience, on the platform rather. One of our speakers, Thomas Britton, has not made it down from Manchester due to transport issues. All being well, fingers crossed, looking at our expert AV tech at the back. He'll be joining us from his car in a car park at Wilmslow train station. So that's commitment to the cause. Thank you to Thomas. We hope that works in. And there's going to be plenty of time for audience questions, both from people in the room and anyone watching online. You can send in questions. Should be an easy to follow online function using Slido. Okay, so that's enough from me, and we should get stuck into the case studies. Our first speaker is Andy Gates, who is Director of Development, Collaboration and Culture at South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority. Andy is here to speak about the Bed for Babies initiative that was referenced, in fact, in the video a moment ago. Andy, over to you.
Brilliant, thank you, and good afternoon, evening, everyone. So I don't really like calling it Beds for Babies, but the Mayor loves Beds for Babies and he likes alliteration, and he said it needed a brand, so that's what we call it. I like to call it a Safe Space to Sleep programme, but I did not win that battle. So 9 years ago, I was here in the same room on a panel about devolution and the benefits it might bring to public service reform. And it was a discussion that we just had in the abstract. It was a little bit like, we might be able to do this, we might be able to do that. This was before in South Yorkshire a mayor existed. We just agreed to have one, and it took us about 5 years to land it. So it's a real privilege to be here and actually talk about a thing we did, and we wouldn't have done it, and we would not have been able to do it, I don't believe, if we hadn't had the powers and the resources and the office of a mayor to make stuff happen. So before getting into what we did, why we did it, and whether it worked, all of those things are still TBC. Why did we do it? There's a hospital in Sheffield in South Yorkshire called Jessop's, Sheffield's Children's. It is massive. Most babies born in Sheffield or in that part of South Yorkshire go through Jessop's. 1 in 10 of the kids that go out of Jessop's, having been born there, do not go home to a safe space to sleep. They do not have a crib, a cot, a Moses basket, blankets, let alone living in a house that doesn't have damp or any of the kind of structural issues that exist. An ever more worrying number is that a lot of the families and women who turn up to give birth, some of those women are not known to statutory services. The first time a statutory service knows that a person in South Yorkshire is having a baby is when they walk through on either a gurney or clutching or just sort of walking in generally, whatever they're doing. That is a cause of real concern, and that is not unique to South Yorkshire. And of course, there are lots of families who are well engaged with community midwifery and all of the services and wraparound support, but there's an enormous amount of families that aren't, and they are not accessing support services available to them. So that was the kind of micro picture. The macro picture is that health inequalities in South Yorkshire are stark. They're really bad. And they are bad comparative to the rest of the country, and they are bad comparative to the rest of the nice bits of South Yorkshire and the poor bits. It's really stark, and they're not really getting any better. So that was the challenge that the Mayor set us, really. And he set a team of us to have a crack at trying a different thing, having another go at fixing those challenges. And long story short, we ended up with the Safe Space to Sleep Beds for Babies programme. It is not the only thing going on in our world around tackling children's and health inequalities. And I'll get into a little bit about what we've physically done. But what we did was, under the Office of the Mayor, establish a cross-sector leadership team that had Directors of Public Health on it, had the Chair of a Hospital Trust, it had Directors of Children's Services on it, it had Voluntary Community Sector on it, it had me, the only person in the room who was not a professional in that kind of space. It had a professor from Sheffield Hallam University, a professor of early years, who runs a brilliant facility, a research-led children's centre, early years centre, in one of the most deprived parts of Sheffield, who actually does practitioner-led university research day in, day out with families. So we built this quite interesting coalition of partners who never, ever normally sit down and talk to each other about a problem. So that's what we did. We applied what Bloomberg Harvard call a problem-driven iterative adaptation approach, PDIA, which is really posh description of we took a problem, we workshopped the problem statement we were trying to fix, absolute clarity across those 8 individuals on that cross-sector team, what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, are we all bought into that? And then we spent a lot of time deconstructing the problem. Lots of you will do them, Ishikawa diagrams, fishbone diagrams, root cause analysis, the 5 whys, all the structural ways in which you kind of break down problems and test that problem. Does that problem look right to you? Does that problem look right to the families we're trying to help? And we ended up building, which is a huge map, and I can send it to you, of all the kind of root causes of the problem we were trying to fix, which was that children and young people's health inequalities are getting worse in South Yorkshire. There were 2 ones we ringed on that. One was trust, so an absence of trust in some of our most deprived communities of statutory services. So we circled that, so we've got to do something about that. And we circled a lack of safe space to sleep issues. We circled that. And why did we circle them? 3 reasons. Because when you apply the sort of AAA analysis, have you got the ability, the authority, or the acceptance to do something about those things, we kind of landed on the fact we probably could. So let's face it, the kids coming out of a hospital without a bed, crib, Moses basket, blankets, that's fixable. You can buy those things and you can distribute to them. It's an aid response, there's no doubt about it, but you can do it. Trust is another one that's like, well, that's a bit harder nut to crack. But what if, and this was the proposition from the team to the Mayor, what if we use providing a family who's never had support or access to a service, or has been failed by a service, or has got a perception of being going to be failed, so we can fix something for you. You haven't got a crib, you haven't got a cot, you haven't got a Moses basket, we'll get you one. We'll get you one, and we'll get it within a week. And whoever refers you in, whether that's a mother and toddler group, whether that's a church group, a faith group, whatever, a statutory community midwife service, if that person can do it, can be the link, the physical link, you've asked me to help, I'm going to sort it, and I'm going to literally deliver this thing to your house, your flat, your tenement, whatever it is, that might just build trust of that family in a service. And that's the thing we were really testing. And when we pitched this sort of proposition to Oliver, the Mayor, and said, you know what, for about £2.5 million, we reckon we can put together a £4 million programme, which will guarantee for any family who needs it, being referred through a statutory and non-statutory agency, we'll test it. And he was like, you know what, let's do it. And we did it. And we got the cash. With the first time we've ever taken a social programmes, as people called it, through our Mayoral Combined Authority, we are really comfortable buying roads and building stuff. and telling DFE that we put some floor space in for a college facility, or supported a business, or bought a bus depot. Really good. Our investment boards love all that sort of stuff. When I pitch up saying, I've got an interesting one for you guys, it was really challenging for our internal teams. And, if I'm honest, some of the lessons we learned, quite challenging for some of our local authorities, who are sat there saying, why are you in this space? Why is the mayor meddling? Why is he getting involved in health? What's it got to do with him? We do health. We do support to children's families. We've got family hubs. Why aren't you talking to them? And of course, some of that challenge was quite right. Some of it was, well, we have talked to them actually, and they're really up for it. So that's the sort of that's why we did the programme, and that's how we did it. So we constructed a team, put some investment in, and we're a year in. So where have we got to? We've supported 2,000 families in South Yorkshire. So 2,000 families, when they need a bed, a crib, a cot, a Moses basket, or a toddler bed, they can get it. They can get it. And they can get it through a family hub, a statutory service, through the community midwifery, or whatever. But they can also get it through small VCSE organisations operating in a neighbourhood, operating in a community that we don't normally get anywhere near. And that's, I think, one of the beauties of the programme. So we have it's a kind of proportional universalism offer, really. It is a universal offer to the kids of South Yorkshire, but it is really going where it's needed the most. We don't turn people away. That's one of the kind of principles we have. But equally, we're not selling it to the good people of the west of Sheffield who live in lovely big houses and are doing all right. But there will be some families who do need it, and they can access it if they do. We're also running 4 intensive pilots, so we chose 4 of the most deprived parts of South Yorkshire and said, let's see what else you can wrap around this offer, what's working, what's not working, to sort of pick up around a universal offer. We'll learn loads from those pilot areas. Each pilot area is doing something differently, which is great. It's a real interesting lesson there. I think we've denuded the ability of local government to innovate. We've just stripped it out. So when I go and say, I've got some pilot funding for you to do a safe space to sleep programme in a particular area, I'm buying some outcomes, I'm buying some ideas. Sometimes the feedback was, the challenge back was, well, yeah, but what do you want? What do you want us to do? Can we do that? Why? Oh, it's like, of course you can. It's a pilot. You can test it. And I think that's the beauty of being able to develop a programme over 4 years with some agency at the local level to go, you know what, if you need to tweak that, you can tweak it. I'm not going to be overly prescriptive about the outputs I'm buying. I'm buying outcomes. I'm buying ideas. And that's been one of the lessons, is that some of that capacity at the local level has been stripped out because all the innovation is done fixing the problems that the centre's causing rather than coming up with new solutions. So that's what we've done. That's why we did it, and that's a bit of how we did it. I'll finish off on some of the lessons. I think I've made this point already. There is no shortage of good ideas out there. Like, ideas aren't the problem. The ability for those ideas to flourish and scale is the problem. Like, there is the most innovative people in public services are the people delivering them, because they are so much more innovative than me and most people in this room as policymakers. They just are. We commissioned an organisation called Baby Basics, who are a VCSE organisation, operate nationally. They are more innovative than any FTSE 100 company in this country, 100 or 250. They are, without a doubt, their ability to draw in philanthropic cash, to make a pound go so much further than a statutory agency can. It's astonishing. So key lesson for me is work with the VCSE. They're a pain. They're an absolute pain. But because they put pressure on you and they don't accept the kind of computer says no. But work with them. Right back at the start of this, and it's a bit. I've been on a course. I've been to Harvard, so I did a bit of a course, and they talk about psychological safety. And obviously, I think it's a load of nonsense because I'm a sort of repressed English person. But it was the most important thing they forced us to do, which was build with that cross-sector team real trust, so that VCSE chief exec could say to the chair of Barnsley Hospital Trust, say to the director of Children's Services in Doncaster, no. That's not how it works. You keep telling us that's how it works, but on the ground, this is actually how it works. And have the confidence and the courage to say it and be listened to, and we'd actually write it down and we'd do something about it. So I think build that psychological safety, and all the research is, if you invest in that up front, you get results that are absolutely stellar compared to a non-diverse team. So I think that was really important. Treat your VCSE well. It's worth the pain. if I was doing this or a similar type project in anywhere else in the country, or indeed still in South Yorkshire doing another one, turf and territory matters. And like Mayoral combined authorities and the GLA and other sort of regional bodies have got size 12 boots, and we're wandering and we tell our local authority partners how to do something that they've been doing for years and trying to do for years. And if they've not been doing it well, it's because they've not been set up to do it well. So you have to be so careful about how you go into something. So just turf and territory really matters. Delivery flexibility. Keep the programme as free as you can to be flexible when it changes, because it will, and that's the beauty of working at our level. You can respond in real time. We're not so removed from the practitioners or the kind of commissioners to be flexible. So build that in right from the start and stick to what you said you wanted to achieve. The easiest thing to get beds, cribs, cots, Moses baskets to families in South Yorkshire would be to give them a £50 IKEA voucher or an Amazon voucher, and that would fix the problem. But you'd have no trust built, because the Amazon delivery driver, the DPD delivery driver, as good as they are, is probably not interested in whether that family is going to put that bed together, or whether it's going to be put in the right place, or whether we've given you that bed. Have you thought about coming to the Family Hub to access our literacy and reading service? I don't know, maybe your Amazon drivers are like that, but mine certainly isn't. But if we'd not stuck to that point about building trust, we could have just done a really simple delivery model and given everyone a voucher. So it's like just being reminded about why you're doing it. And if you spent a lot of time working out what the problem is you are trying to fix and everyone agreeing it, then that bit of that system process is a heck of a lot easier. And I think that's probably my time and also my reflections.
Great, thank you, Andy. Just before I call Vicky up, I was going to ask one quick follow-up question to you, Andy. So, I mean, the question I was going to ask you kind of addressed already, which was what would be the top piece of advice you'd give to a new or existing strategic authority trying to do something similar for the first time. And I think that the interesting thing you spoke about was the pushback or friction you face with the local authorities that you had to work around. So what would be the advice you'd give, or what did you do that helped get around that initial challenge of you coming in with your size 12 boots, as you put it?
Yeah, you keep at it. So I think like the parlance is, you know, your sort of authority and acceptance to do it, and the acceptance of the people who are going to be delivering it. And you think you've done that by speaking to a director of children's services or a senior policy lead in the local authority. And then you realise they don't have the acceptance of their frontline staff to do it. So if you just have to keep going down and down and down and going, we're doing this thing. Does it look right? Is it going to cause you some issues? Tell us and we'll tweak it. And we didn't get it right. So I've got families, health visitors who are like, you what? There's a 10-storey flat in the centre of Sheffield. I've now got to lug a toddler bed up to the top of it. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for that. So I get grief, and I've had grief all the way from the politicians down. Because we didn't do enough work with those people. We've fixed it. We've put in different things to do it. So that's probably the thing to do. Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Yes, Vicky, thanks for waiting patiently over there. So our next case study will be presented by Vicky Hobart. Thanks a lot for being with us. So Vicky is Group Director of Public Health at the Greater London Authority, working closely with the Mayor of London. And Vicky's going to be speaking about the Health in All Policies approach and the work of the Public Health Unit that she leads. So over to you, Vicky.
Thank you. And yeah, real pleasure to be here. So yes, I'm Vicky. I head up a shared service across the GLA group, which is focused on health and all policies and health resilience. And in bringing forward a case study, a quick 10 minutes to give a flavour, in choosing what that might be that would bring this to life. I mean, I hope this is offering a kind of where we're at in a sort of maturity matrix, having been 25 years in, and a system that's kind of building on a range of policy and initiative across different mayoralties. So it's offered in that spirit. And I'm going to finish with some sort of direct links, which we've developed through a programme, which is some very good references, I hope, for you to be able to take away in terms of how you might take forward health and all policies locally. So first thing is, how do you make the case for health? People are busy. health is not about the NHS. A lot of politicians can find the NHS quite overwhelming, and the sense of responsibility around health outcomes as they relate to the health service, if that isn't your core role, quite overwhelming. I often use this quote from the old Chief Medical Officer 2018 around health as an asset, how that links to productivity and a range of other outcomes, and how breaking down silos and more collaborative working is the way to go forward. But there's a science and an art to that. So I'm going to talk you through how we've sort of taken it across both those domains, really, the scientific approach, but also the art and social science approaches that you need to take that kind of thing forward. You also need to explain health inequalities in your place. And again, if you're not careful, that can feel really overwhelming. So in London, we produce a snapshot of data. People need to get to the data quickly. What are health inequalities in London? It's a big place. What are the priorities? They need to be able to access that data. But even then, you need to be able to bring hearts and minds with you. London we used to use the Jubilee line, the new extension, because basically people used to lose a year of life expectancy as you went east. You might remember this. 2012 Olympics, there was a big convergence agenda around health inequalities in London. We've now moved on to trying to use the Elizabeth line of drawing out. It's not quite as neat, but A, it demonstrates progress, because those inequalities, a lot of them have been turned around in East London, not all, but many have. But also it just shows how granular that is, just between stops. If you compare Liverpool Street and Custom House, for example, how stark they are. So you've got to bring that to life in a way that your politicians can't stand up and say it's really complicated. Like, you've lost the public health strategy at that point. It's complicated. Yeah, they need some hooks. We've touched on this, the devolution story in London. It's been going 25 years. So what makes up the mandate as a whole? What are all these, what's the authorising environment for action? So clearly, these are politically led organisations. What is the Mayor's manifesto commitments? What are the mandates that the Mayor creates during that term? And how is that articulated across the organisation? And in the GLA, that isn't just the GLA authority, it's the group. So the Mayor provides policy direction for other organisations, Transport for London, Police and Crime, Fire, Development Corporation. So understanding that governance piece, the political priorities, as well as the organisational ones. There's been expansion of devolution over that time, so it's not just a strategic authority writing strategy. That was a big deal when it was set up. I happened to work there 25 years ago, writing the first transport strategy for London after quite a while. Very big and very important. The strategy isn't enough, and there's a lot of devolved powers that go alongside that that enable action to take place. There's a duty in there in the GLA Act originally to think about health considerations in making decisions. So it's a social, economic, environmental purpose. People need to think about health as they're doing that. That's been there from the beginning, and that's a cornerstone, a health duty, if you like. In 2007, there was an additional requirement around health inequalities to produce a strategy for London. Didn't quite have the levers that everyone had to follow it, but the Mayor was required to produce a strategy for London. So Sadiq published his in 2018, 10-year strategy, very simple framing around 5 aims and some quite specific granular commitments. And that has been a platform on which the Mayor has been able to publish. He's now on his 3rd sort of implementation plan. What am I doing as the Mayor? Not responsible for all of this, but how am I playing my part? What are my priorities in this space? So that's been important. And that also introduced this statutory health advisor role. So I've got 2 bosses, one in the GLA, and we're hosted in Communities and Skills. And I have another boss who's in what is now, when I applied for the role, it's Public Health England. It's now Department of Health, Office of Health Improvement and Disparities. And that role, Kevin Fenton plays as the statutory health advisor to the GLA group. So Kevin is there as the go-to person, and that can be anything from when things kick off and you need urgent health advice, who do you go to, through to a whole range of strategic advice. And that's nuanced, that's a relationship. There's different people involved in supporting that relationship, but it is a statutory relationship. The role exists, statutory advisor. And I don't think that exists in any of the other regions. Sadiq, mayors in London are also in the Civil Contingencies Act Category 1 responders. So it's recognised that the Mayor of London has a voice in health and health protection from a civil contingencies perspective. And that came to the fore during COVID for a range of reasons, different in other regions. We've also got the London Assembly and that governance model, so it's not a combined authority. The Assembly have a health committee, and that committee holds the mayor to account in various ways, through mayor's questions, through plenaries, but also has a power to investigate matters of interest to Londoners. And sometimes that health committee agenda and the mayor's agenda are very much pushing in the same direction. They're looking at men's mental health at the moment. That's a big priority for the mayor. That's really trying to galvanise action in that space. And then finally, the group themselves as a shared service. Transport for London have their priorities. MOPAC, Police and Crime, working with the Met, have their priorities, their corporate priorities, their service priorities. So that's also in the mix. So Sadiq has set out very clear health outcome priorities, if you like, around child health, mental health, and in this term, heart health. Outcomes are not great. There's a lot of preventable disease and disability, undiagnosed high blood pressure, physical stuff we can do. So very clear priorities, as well as health and growth agenda. And priorities around ways of working. I've mentioned the health and equality strategy, put the link there, implementation plan, if these go around after. Health and all policies, what I'm talking about today, as a commitment in taking forward the mayor's work, and then the relationship with the health and care system and partnerships, which, as you know, is shifting a bit at the moment. So the examples, I thought, should I bring a concrete example? How did we work it through? And there were plenty to choose from, and some of them took a lot of officer and political capital to get them done. So from a health perspective, you're going to clean up air quality by taking polluting vehicles off the streets, the ultra-low emission zone. Yeah, I'm sure colleagues will recognise the two-ins and throw-ins. The health aim of that got very lost in a lot of the debates. It is a public health intervention. It's about cleaning up the air for London. Obesogenic environment for children. Again, the GLA playing its part in full. The mayor doesn't have all the levers to tackle child obesity. There's certain things the Mayor of London can do. How do you pick them? What's the evidence? And then have you got the political and officer capital and resources to follow it through? Yeah, because it can be tough going sometimes. So I could have spent 3 hours probably talking about the ad ban. So that was taking high-fat, high-sugar adverts off the transport network. And that's been picked up with local government as well. And then the third area might have been around public health approach to reducing violence. And how did we shift the approach there? All of that framed around the GLA group playing its part, but not having the levers or being responsible for all of it. Looking for co-benefits, so not just the health outcome, but how was it benefiting other objectives that other bits of the organisation are seeking, but also mitigations. So if another team, another function is pursuing something, how do we mitigate harm? And then finally, prioritising. There's no end of opportunity from a public health perspective, so how are we prioritising? So UNIT was set up in 2022. I've put here a prospectus not to look at. This is what we share with the group, which is who are we as a public health team. I'm not going to go into masses of detail. We're co-funded by the GLA, as I say, but also Transport for London, MOPAC, etc. And we are there to help them operationalise this. Yeah, co-benefits and then mitigating health harms of what they might be, helping them work that through. How can that happen? And we try and take a very simple approach. In amongst all this complexity just puts people off. How do you keep it as simple as you can in a very complex environment? So understanding the levers, developing skills and knowledge in other bits of the organisations. We do a lot of masterclasses, webinars, team-to-team sessions. And then how do you embed it in policy, programme and governance, sort of more structurally in organisations? We also recognise that health resilience is also a big thing, and COVID would be an example of that. But for a mayor to talk about health, for a politically led organisation to talk about health, they're not responsible in this case, for the NHS. But health is very difficult to pick apart into different strands. So yes, you can talk about health improvement and obesity, but if you've got a voice on health, you often need support in that holistically, so a single voice. And resilience is one of those. There are a number of threats to health. So the unit also plays a role in that space as well. And that could be, obviously COVID's the most biggest example, occupied us a lot. But then something like heat health at the moment, we've just been through our third heat wave in London. What does that mean, in terms of working with partners? We've developed a levers framework, which we're just about to put up on the website. We're just tweaking it a little bit, nearly there, next few weeks. And interesting, we started by, let's list out all the levers that the GLA has. The mayor can do this, this and this on transport, and this and this on housing, and it was getting bigger and bigger. And then we were like, well, hang on a minute, this mayor did this thing with this thing, they didn't have to do it, what are the levers? So we came up with a much more processes that was about recognising where teams were starting out in their health and all policies journey and helping them structure that. Sometimes understanding health impacts is a really important first step, and that can be hard work, processing data, looking at opportunities, understanding, before you move on to starting to advocate for what needs to change, and then ultimately where an actual intervention might happen. Wanted to finish off just with an offer, really. So there's been a programme in place, I think, I've got Grace in the room, I can't quite remember how many years we've been going, good, yeah. So the recent programme, which is hosted by the West Midlands Combined Authority and has been about mayoral regions coming together to develop approaches to tackling health inequalities. So a lot of the work and the thought has already started, yeah? So there's an awful lot to build on. And you can see they're the ones that were involved in early days. And I think the reflection there would be there's lots and lots of work and case studies we can draw into this. And the mayoral regions are in very different stages of development, and their relationships are very different with other bits of the system that are in. And I'll offer my reflections on London in a minute. There is a toolkit, the link is there, which is a real guide to what are the pillars for action. What are those planning things you need to think about, the pillars of action that are going to underpin health and all policies in a mayoral region, and then some opportunities for action, some case studies. And you've got them pulled out there from a whole range. And it's not death by London, it's not death by Manchester, it's not death by West Midlands, although the three of us have probably worked most closely to get it going. It really is drawing on experience from around the country. So I'd really recommend that. And you can see the little circle there, how they've been framed, which comes from the mayoral region's perspective of, if we're doing health inequalities, where do we go? So quick reflections. London is big, complex. It's 1 in 7 people in England. It's global. It has a whole range of assets, frontier industry, et cetera, The transferability, therefore, of some of the stuff and how it works is limited, particularly into more rural regions. So there's a big dose of place, as I said at the outset. What's the local narrative? What's the opportunity? Coterminosity helps. So for all the complexity, we do have 5 ICSs. Not quite sure how many we'll have, but we do have, and they are coterminous. The city and the region map onto each other. London makes sense as a concept. We're not thinking of brand and identity from that perspective. Single voice on health. We work very closely with the team that takes forward the mayor's programmes, the Health, Children and Young Londoners unit. So each mayor will want to do things, yeah, to invest, to get things done. So we work very, very closely with those teams where there's a health delivery part of it. But our role in the public health unit does have to take that single voice on health, thinking about health protection, the health and care system, health improvement, health inequalities, like health and all the things that determine it, if that makes sense. Prioritisation is a big deal for us. There's no end of opportunity. Exactly to your point, you can identify opportunities. How do you take it forward? Health and equality strategy, a key enabler, but not necessarily sufficient, but it has been a key enabler. And then looping that back to communities, because ultimately health and equalities is going to make any difference at all if it does relate back to what's actually happening on the ground, and that can be quite a test at a regional level to demonstrate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Absolutely, yeah, fascinating agenda, and as you've talked us through, it is genuinely cutting across, it seems, almost everything or every function the GLA works on. I mean, just a quick follow-up question, and then I'm pleased to say our third speaker is ready to speak from his car in Manchester. You mentioned how the GLA, ever since the start, actually had a health duty through the GLA Act, and then that was strengthened through a health inequalities duty of some kind in legislation. Based on the publication of the devolution bill by the government just last week, something similar, I mean, whether it's exactly the same or not, I'm not sure, but is going to be written into the law for all other mayoral combined authorities. You've given some insights, obviously, into the core lessons and so on, but if you were speaking to an authority, maybe taking on this power for the first time and maybe hasn't an area that hasn't really thought about health as one of its functions before, what would be the top piece of advice? Like, where should they start if they're going to try and improve health and health inequalities, given it touches upon so many things?
I touched on the answer is not data, like here's the priority, but that co-creation of a narrative and what it's about that moves it from health inequalities being a huge beast that you're somehow in one move going to tackle to get some shared understanding in a sustainable way that sets up the authority and the partners to be looking at the same information, looking at the same, being able to test each other but with support would be important. And the early stages with the GLA often were through development of policy and strategy with some fairly structured process around things like a health impact assessment or an integrated impact assessment. So thinking about how are you going to build in health considerations to the processes that the organisation is going to be doing and delivering and prioritising for whatever reason, and really thinking about how you mobilise good, solid support into that to make the most of those early opportunities. And it's tricky and it's local and it's about bringing people with you because you're trying to balance where's the opportunity to make a difference, where is the real opportunity because something's actually going to change or move on as a result. So local narrative alongside understanding of early process and priorities that you can influence.
Great, incredibly helpful. Okay, thank you. So now to our third case study. So from Greater Manchester Combined Authority, delighted to welcome Thomas Britton, who is going to be speaking to us about the Working Well programme that joins up employment support and health policy, which is a programme Thomas works on, obviously working closely with Mayor Andy Burnham there. So Thomas, hopefully you can hear us. I
can hear you.
Great.
Hey.
So welcome, thanks for making this work. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and sincere apologies for not being able to make it down today. I made every effort. I got as far as Tamworth before the train had to turn around and bring me home. But either way, we're here. So, really good to see everybody. So I just wanted to start off, I suppose, I wanted to bring Working Well to the discussion today, really. It's something I've been working on or have led since 2014, so 12 years now. And it's quite it's been quite a fantastic journey of growth and development of what was a small project to try and test doing something different. And ultimately challenge the way that things may have been delivered centrally or through Whitehall, and with that some great successes. So I really am keen to show you some of that today. So if I could go over to the next slide, please. Excellent. So Working Well, as you might imagine, so working, employment and well health. So this is a programme that focuses on people with poor health, disabilities, complex needs, and ultimately, for those that can cast their memories back to 2017, was kind of inspired by that good work is good for your health and built on the Improving Lives paper of Dame Carol Black, for those who are closely linked to that. But ultimately, it was an awareness in Greater Manchester of some of the challenges that exist here and quite significant health and employment inequalities. There are 140,000 GM residents, for example, who are economically inactive due to poor health, and that 53% of disabled people in paid work compared to 81%, which again shows some of the depth and challenges that we have around fairness and equality within our society. Again, 1 in 3 working age population have at least one long-term health condition, and 1 in 5 disabled, which gives you an idea of how common some of these challenges are. And again, our approach of Working Well and that focus on good work being good for your health is about economic growth. It's about inclusiveness within our labour market and our economy in Greater Manchester, which is critical to our development of a fairer and prosperous Greater Manchester as we move forward. So intimately linked with, and I would say, a key part of the growth and development of a more modern Mayoral manifesto from Andy Burnham is the commitment to live well, which others may know as the prevention demonstrator, but ultimately, in Greater Manchester, what is that? What is live well? It's an ethos, a question, or new ways of working together, or at least building on what we've been trying to achieve for the last 12 or so years. And it begs the question, what does it mean for an adult to live well in Greater Manchester, or indeed anywhere in the country? That is good health, it's good work, it's good housing, it's good education, stable families, a sense of community. And how do we grow and develop that? And ultimately, employment sits at the core and the heart of it. If you were to, achieve good housing, then it needs to be good, sustainable housing for which a good job and a stable job is critical. And again, just to stress that link between good work and good health. If you're out of work, you're much more likely to have health conditions and to struggle. So we're looking in Greater Manchester at engaging people differently through community outreach. We're looking at how we wrap support around and how do we coordinate public services to work together to achieve common goals, recognising that individuals don't just have unemployment or economic inactivity as a barrier. They have the social determinants of why they are where they are: poor housing, low skills, chaotic family lifestyles, drug and alcohol abuse, and so on, so forth. And ultimately as well, it's about looking at the system as a whole and looking at how we can reduce duplication and how we can deliver a more preventative method of progressing people through their lives. And I think, a good example of that, as I've noted on the slide, is about pathways to care and alternative pathways to care, and how you can help somebody to improve their health, not just through the NHS or through clinical interventions, but through other means. And it's about utilising those. So over the slides, if you don't mind. Thank you. So over the last 12 years, some key principles that we have, built on, developed, and this has come through on our evaluations and learnings, is just the importance of that bespoke, personalised and holistic support, looking in around why people are where they are, looking at the role of a key worker. And you can imagine a key worker, they're incredible roles. They're superheroes in my eyes. They develop that trust and that relationship with individuals as single points of contact. But then their role is essentially as a key worker is to hold the key. And that is the key to access the right services at the right point in time and to help segue or navigate people to that support. And I think a good example of that is if you have somebody who is struggling with drug and alcohol abuse, then I could perhaps get them a job tomorrow, but it's not going to be sustainable work. We've got to unpick the reasons why they are where they are and get them on that journey towards and into employment. So that's really a critical role for that key work around wraparound support, sequence support, but ultimately with work as the core goal, because it's the linchpin to almost everything. In-work support, keeping people in work is a real important part of what we do. There's one thing getting a job, but turning your back on people after, unpicking social barriers and then, to move people into work and turn your back is the wrong thing to do. You've got to recognise that those social interventions and those health interventions are still required through the duration of individuals' experiences. But key to our sort of work as well is about the sort of continuous improvement and local management. Somebody said earlier just how important it is that people delivering the programme are in the success of devolution, and it's so true that we must listen to delivery and how we're delivering and adapt the way that we deliver as we go to make sure that we're reducing those duplications, to make sure that we're giving people a better customer experience, to make sure that we're approaching people's barriers in the best possible way through that wider ecosystem coordination or through direct delivery itself. Over the slide. So yeah, working well. I've mentioned already, it's worked for or been operating as a service. It started as a small project to about £8 million, and it's got, in 2014, testing those principles or, is where those principles have ended up. And it's grown and developed from small devolved cash to quite large mainstream devolution of what would otherwise be national work and health programme, the JETS programme, or otherwise that some may be familiar with. But we work across a whole range of employment and health-related need, which ranges from economic inactivity, people with poor health and disability who are unable to look for work, unemployment as a result of poor health, to those that are at risk in work, but at risk of falling out of work as a result of poor health. And I suppose to that end is trying to stem the flow of people falling further down or cascading towards economic inactivity, but also to support people while they're in work to progress in work and to develop their skills and to move forward and get that promotion. So as you can see a list of different projects and programs along the bottom. There's plenty of them, and what we've done with those projects and programs is delivered alongside our evaluations as well. So a huge amount of learning, which I'm welcome to have a look at on our webpage. Over the slide, if you wouldn't mind. So here's just a few observations about, and some of the outcomes that we've had to date. So we've supported 87,000 people through Working Well to date. 32,000 people have been helped into sustainable work. And it's worth noting that these are people with quite severe barriers, many of which I think on one of our programs on average had 6 to 8 barriers, severe barriers to employment, which ranges across, as I say, health, housing, chaotic lifestyles, and so you could argue are quite marginalised and may have been through a number of different national programmes prior to coming to a Working Well offer. But quite remarkably, when you look at the supply and demand, there's more 200,000 people in Greater Manchester that would be eligible for health and disability employment-related support, but only 6,000 spaces are available a year at the minute as a result of funding and otherwise from current or previous governments. What we can evidence is that, of the £146 million that has been invested into Working Well to date, we've seen a return of £1.75 for every pound invested, which is quite a phenomenal return. And through that investment, we've also invested in our VCSFE organisations who have benefited from 50% of that investment. I mentioned earlier, but on average, multiple disadvantage is quite clear within our cohorts, 3 to 5 severe barriers to employment. But what you do see through that sort of coordination of the system is comparably 10 times more integration in Greater Manchester's Working Well delivery compared to other national equivalents, which is quite testament to the coordination that goes on through the institutions around, through key partners and otherwise. And then just the last point, which is actually covered up by my camera field, but it's about strong performance. Our performance does compare comparably quite well with national offers. And that, I think that's an important note as well, because that's despite quite significant differences. So that might be, doubling the size of our programs, for example, through local monies, higher levels of deprivation in Greater Manchester. So a big question I think that we all should be asking ourselves when we're trying to compare is what will we compare to? You can't compare Greater Manchester to the south east. But yeah, over the slides.
Thomas, can you hear me?
Time, yeah.
Sorry, I'm just a bit conscious of the time. Apologies, it's just where we've got to. Just wonder if you could possibly accelerate to the final slides quite quickly, if that's possible.
Yeah. So this slide isn't the final slide, so you might want to skip on. But ultimately, that wheel gives you an idea of that sort of additionality. But in some of the key lessons, that we've drawn from the programmes to date in delivery is about coterminous footprints and how important they've been. In Greater Manchester, we're quite unique in that we've got a combined authority, a job centre plus district, an integrated care service that all co-align geographically, and we're able to develop our strategies much more clearly and succinctly. An open door or no wrong door. So that's something we're trying to achieve in Greater Manchester, where people come through single points of access to streamline and simplify the system. Another point around not putting plaster on it, but recognising that individuals' needs are both personal and systemic, and then multi-tiered systems as well. But I'll leave it there. I'm mindful.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And yeah, just to be clear, we'll be circulating the slides afterwards, because I think, that last slide really does draw out some of the key lessons that other speakers have touched upon as well. So thank you. So we should thank Thomas for his contribution. Okay, great. So before we open it up, I've seen some questions online, and please do be ready in the room. Pete, you've been sitting here listening to the three presentations. What's your response to the insights you've heard, and what's your broader assessment of the role of devolution and local leaders in addressing health inequalities?
Thank you, Akash. I'm mindful of time, so I'll try and keep my remarks brief, but just say it feels like we have fantastic examples of the potential that devolution has, and also the range of kind of complexities in doing that well. But just to kind of place myself in the room, as Akash mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of Impact on Urban Health. I am also a former local councillor, so I have a general kind of faith and belief in the power of municipal government. The more you can bring power closer to communities, the more likely you are to understand what you're working with and get solutions that really have a good chance of sticking. And at Impact on Urban Health, fundamentally, we want cities to be healthier places for everyone to live, particularly those who are furthest from living in good health. And so just, some of the big themes arising, contextualizing where we're at, like hearing from these authorities, it's representative of the UK context. 4/5 of us live in cities. And I think every speaker spoke to just the extent of inequalities that can exist within our cities. And even on kind of smaller scales, often people just streets apart can have really stark differences in their health outcomes. And I think another really salient point that came out was that where you're looking at those health challenges, you really have to take the wider lens. This isn't about things that the NHS can solve. It's about kind of what's the quality of house that you're in. Are you having to live with damp and mold? It's about the quality and accessibility of work, availability of green spaces, and much more. And I think cities are clearly one of the places where those inequalities show up kind of very starkly, particularly for those who are kind of economically deprived or facing kind of racial or other types of discrimination. And for me, what's been so exciting about the discussion is the fact that this really shows that the change that's possible in places like cities, some of the things that drive their challenges, which can be like the kind of density of kind of population, also speak to the possibility of solutions as well, and the fact that there are so many assets in places. And I think another kind of theme that came through all the talks is that you're working with, not on your population, trying to get them to help you understand the nature of the problem that you're facing, and shaping the solution to those as well. So it's great to see those kind of themes. Just to kind of pitch in further to some more of our work, there are kind of three things that we see that are hugely important, both for devolution to be successful and for health inequality to be addressed. And that is kind of place, kind of the role for communities, role for collaboration. And I'd probably add a bonus fourth of like the sharing of learning, and I think all of those have come out really clearly in folks' remarks. Just in place, just recognizing that, as I said before, so much of your health is shaped at a neighborhood level, what's around you, and that is the kind of key axis with which those solutions are going to have to operate. And then with communities, it just goes to the idea that so often when people are treated as passive recipients, then the prospects that, you know, the cot setup's going to be appropriate, you're going to be able to get the thing up to the right room, you're going to understand what is the genuine barrier to someone getting into work is just lower. So the room that you can create for people to share their lived experience, shape solutions, feels really important. And then I just draw out collaboration as a theme. And here, I think we heard through all of the talks again, is recognizing that, yes, there's a kind of role for government, but if you really, part of the power of devolution is that as you get closer to communities, you can work with them, you can work with business, you can work with anchor institutions locally and design solutions that are really kind of fit for the place that they're in. Whilst we mainly focus on our work on London, though with an eye towards solutions that can work across the UK, and in our place we've seen approaches where kind of communities shape solutions, and I think devolution is great because it potentially creates more room for that. And so there's something in one of the most diverse, economically deprived wards in Southwark, which is kind of where our offices are based. It's based out of a school called Surrey Square Primary School. It's called the Old Kent Road Family Zone. And what they essentially did was kind of start with parents and children and ask them about the things that they might need to help improve their health. And then the school used its kind of convening power, working with the local government, working with a range of local institutions. And there, what you've seen is when people are trying to improve their health, it's, you know, it can be things like getting benefits advice to a place where they're at and can access, and where someone can help look after their child so they can actually get the advice in the right language. It's a marketplace, so you can kind of do kind of trading of skills and goods. It can even be like kind of cooking classes. So I think just that idea that by devolving power, you can create room for a wider range of solutions that are going to help get people into work, that are going to make sure that children can grow up somewhere safe, and that are going to kind of ensure that you can address some of those systemic issues in places like the quality of air and beyond. So it feels like a really kind of interesting debate. It would be great to kind of hear some of the rooms. So I'm going to stop a bit short, but just really I'd kind of close by saying it feels the importance of place, of communities, of collaboration are key, and sharing learning just critical as well.
Great. Okay, thanks, Pete. Okay. Yes, okay, so let's go straight to the room. There's a mic at the back, so please do keep to very brief questions. There's a gent here. If anyone else wants to stick their hand up, yeah, we'll take a group of them. So yeah, please.
Thank you for all of that. Just two brief points. In future, health in UK is going to be very, very much more centralised, and that is going to leave a lot less room for other parties to get involved. So I think, although the initiatives we've heard about this afternoon have been good, I think they're going to be crowded out in future. I'd appreciate any views on that. And secondly, we've had I don't want to call it interesting, but we've had devolution in Scotland for something like 20 years. Their health system is absolutely awful. It's hardly an advert for devolution, is it?
Okay, fair point. Yeah, so we'll take then the chap there. Thank you.
Thank you. In the new
Max
Edgington from Islington Council. In the new devolution bill, there's a measure about rights to request. So I'd be interested on hearing the various views of the combined authorities about what extra powers they'd seek to request for health and health inequalities. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't plant that, but that was absolutely a follow-up I wanted to ask myself, so excellent. Anybody else? Okay, sorry, there's a couple of hands. Yeah, the chap there then, thanks.
Yeah, Neil Nerva, Chair of the Local Government Information Unit and a Brent councillor. We'd be very happy, as the LGRU, to be speaking with you. But I just wanted to pick up on the what I sense from the London experience of the GLA in a really positive way promoting health, yeah? Adult sort of operational stuff being with ICBs and a whole range of trusts and local authorities. and what the future will be as mayoralities actually are empowered to be addressing health inequality issues, how they work, and I think this has been picked up earlier, how they pick up with unitary authorities and what the link is going to be.
Okay.
To actually operationalise and not just have strategies, but to be able to operationalise on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, let's come back to the panel then. So don't feel obliged to answer all of those, but Pete, do you have any reflections first on?
Sure. I might pick up the question just on health in the UK getting centralised, and whilst I won't cover the totality of it, like there are lots of things that we see in the NHS's 10-year plan that have, I think, potentially really transformative, positive power, like that broader lens focusing on the social determinants more and looking at policies like mandatory reporting of the healthiness of food sales that, even though they are kind of national in nature, potentially stand to be quite helpful. And then just taking some of those headline shifts that have been talked about and the move from kind of hospital to communities and even looking at things like financial advice in more kind of community settings, speak to there being some room that we're quite excited about for taking a more generally preventative lens. I think one of the real challenges would just be as the kind of architecture of ICBs and so much else is being pulled out and apart and mixed together in different ways, that kind of community voices don't get lost. And I think the move away from health watches being something that's quite kind of locally empowered potentially is one of the riskier areas where those local voices could suffer a bit.
Thank you. Vicky, do you want to pick up on, I mean, maybe that question about right to request? You have thoughts? Or no, or the other one. You can dodge that if you want.
Maybe right to, it's not so, to your point, how's it going to work with unitaries, English devolution, pace, scale of change? I mean, to offer up, you know, what helps it work in London, it is incredibly complex. It's 1 in 7 people. I could list off a whole set of reasons why it's so complex to galvanise London, to point in one direction, to take bold action where that's required by a number of agencies. I mean, some of the key players and the relationships that underpin that are very important. So coming out of COVID, we have the London Partnership Board. There are 6 missions in London which are galvanising partnerships. So there's that sort of arrangements and structure, Mayor and London Council's relationship and co-chairing. There's also the officer level relationships that support this. So from a health perspective, and this will be similar to other officer networks, you know, whether transport colleagues or environment colleagues, how do they work with local government? How do they work with the big providers of services in whatever guise that is, whether that's hospitals or not? So for us in London, the Directors of Public Health network has been very important. So their leadership around health and health inequalities in place with their communities, not that they are the single voice in that, but they're gripping that and they are helping to understand what do you do once for London, what is enabling doing once for London to enable that action at a local level. And I do quite a lot of work with the Directors of Public Health outside London. And so that move and that arrangement of how do you galvanise around a politically led authority in a political environment with other authorities, and that's what I was suggesting. There's a lot of art to that as well as science. You need the science and the data, but you also need the art of how do you get people pointing in the same direction to take action on a small set of kind of prioritised areas. And I think colleagues are interested to see the time, I'm sure for other DevoLab events you're going to have, what does the timeline look like? And certainly from the Mayoral Regions programme, there's a lot of interest to understand the timescales for the English Devolution Bill and how we start to build that sense of what has worked in other regions that can be applied really quickly to some of the newer regions, and how does local government play its part in the same way. You know, people are playing their part, they're co-creating, working with communities.
Okay, thanks. Thomas, if you can still hear us, I was interested in your take on, or your response to any of those questions, really, but including the one about right to request further powers. I mean, are there things that Mayor of Greater Manchester, GMCA, have their eye on?
I better not But I better not go down that route. I don't know, to be honest with you, being blunt. So, no.
Okay, not to worry. All right, fine. If you want to come back...
Do we know... I mean, there's a question for today. Are any likely to request additional powers on health? I mean, from health and equalities perspective, it's pretty limited, the baseline. So it'll be interesting to see, won't it? Whether, for other authorities that have been around for a while, they've got a well-progressed agenda. It will be interesting to see.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Andy, so over to you on that question, but also while I have the floor, a couple of questions come in online specifically for you. So one... that you said that partners want to close the trust gap with people in scope for the Safe Place to Sleep programme. So what's the data or what feedback have you had that that's worked, that trust has actually increased? And then the other question I think is a good one for you. Someone anonymous has asked or said they'd welcome thoughts on MCA's capacity to deliver these kind of non-core programmes, given the fundamental focus of MCAs on economic growth. And are we potentially setting up some MCAs to fail if we broaden their scope too quickly? That seems like quite a big question. Yeah. So, big question. If you can give a short answer, though, that would be appreciated.
Yeah. So, first of all, having a duty doesn't mean you have to do anything about it. So, mayors will pick and choose the things that they care about and do more or less on that. We have a duty to produce a local nature recovery strategy. We'll write a strategy, but until there's some significant resources attached to that, we'll do the bare minimum. Some mayoral combined authorities will do the bare minimum on health because they probably lack the coterminous geographies where transport, planning, housing, skills, police, fire, and health all come together. That's really difficult for some places, so I suspect they'll probably just sort of put that in the maybe do it one day box. In terms of the question about MCA's capacity to deliver, it's a real challenge. And not all MCAs are created equal. Not all MCAs have the same access to the same funding resources. For the first time in November, we will be part of the local government finance settlement, so we will actually be given a settlement as local government. So that would be first. Today, we currently work out our budget lines, just sort of taking a bit from here, asking Peter to borrow from Paul, and it's crazy. It doesn't work. So capacity is a real issue. The pushback on that, the premise of that question is that MCAs is to do the economy and then they stay out of everything else. First of all, health is wealth, so it's a kind of an obvious one that it's not just the economy stupid. Doing the economy does all the other things for you anyway. But I think that's probably just a very narrow vision of what mayoral combined authorities are. Our mayor was elected on a campaign pledge to make South Yorkshire, over a very long period of time, the healthiest region in the country. So that's not attached to a power or a function or a duty. So mayors go where they want to go, and they will. So you won't be constrained what's in your box of tricks. On right to request, I speak to my Devo counterpart. My actual day job is devolution, not running like Safe Place to Sleep type programs. There'll be some interesting conversations about right to request. I suspect we will spend a lot more time broadening and deepening the pillars around employment and skills, and they're going to sit those two together, potentially, and on the things where we can make an impact on health without it being necessarily in the health box. So I suspect we will. That's a far easier battle than working out where the powers and lines of accountability fit for an NHS system that no one knows how it works, no one's in charge, there is no single lever. So in that environment, like, where do you insert a mayoral T anyway?
Okay, thank you. So I think we'll run over a couple minutes, just as we did start slightly late. Thomas, there was one specific question for you, which hopefully is less of a, what do you call it, Yorker than the last one I gave to you, which is, would you like to expand, well, the person says they'd be interested to hear Thomas expand on how devolution, and maybe in particular the Working Well programme, has had a positive impact on healthy life expectancy in Greater Manchester, which is what some independent evaluations of that, or of devolution in general, have concluded.
Yeah, absolutely. a really good question, and like you say, less of a Yorker than the other one for me. So I think we have, as a programme, contributed across a much wider range of interventions than just employment support. When you look at how our investment is split up, it's actually probably around about half of the investment that in an individual will go on to deconstructing social barriers. So if I was to shout out some stats, and they're actually, in the presentation, that there've been 140,000 referrals. 140,000 not referrals, but direct health interventions through Working Well, where we've brought additional health support to ultimately prevent the use of the NHS to make up for losses or gaps, for example. And I think a really good example was our talking therapy service, part of the Working Well family, which recognised that there was a 9-month waiting list for mental health services in Greater Manchester at the time. And if we're delivering the right support at the right point in time for individuals, then we needed to invest in that area separately. And that's what we did to make sure people got the right support. So, again, additional to that, it's about not just about directly health or employment, because housing has a very close link to health as well, and we've made over 15,000 or 12,000 referrals to housing associations and housing support for people that are at risk of homelessness. So around prevention, I think the contribution is significant. This is about how do we look after people's needs here and now? How do we prevent those needs from getting worse, and therefore how do we prevent greater usage or greater presentation of health needs?
Okay, thank you. So with apologies to those who were unable to get their questions in, I'd like to draw the proceedings to a close. Those in the room, please do join us for a drink afterwards and to continue the conversation. So just a few thanks from me to close. So thank you to everyone joining us today. Please do join us at the upcoming sessions of the DevoLab. The next one we'll be looking at transport connectivity. We'll be up in Leeds for that, but live streamed as well. That's in September the 15th. And do also please feel free to get in touch with suggestions for other policy areas or specific cases you think we should spotlight as part of this programme. Thanks again in particular to Pete and his team, Natasha, who we've worked with on this event and Impact on Urban Health as an organisation. And do look out for the publication and the written case studies that will be coming up in the next couple of months. Thanks also to our strategic series partners, L&G, with whom we'll be working on over the coming months. And last but not least, thank you to our excellent presenters and panel, Andy Gates, Vicky Hobart, Thomas Britton online, and Peter Babudu. So please join me in thanking them in the usual way.